Mr. Cannell.
Did we want, okay, that was just for Darlene, never mind.
Today's enterprise involves the prosecuting attorney and referring allegations to the Washington State Patrol. Question: did Ms. Hoffner do the right thing? Why or why not?
Yeah, obviously, I saw the article. I think just about the entire county is talking about it. And this is not an attempt at an artful dodge. I'm not going to comment because I believe there's potential to be handling the prosecution if it comes in, if it's referred back to the Washington State Patrol. I'm not going to take a position on the soundness of the referral because I believe that could complicate and create issues for the representation of the county if there is a referral that comes back for prosecution.
This is a PUD question. What is your position on the 2.5 billion water reserve power generation proposal?
Water reservoir?
Water reservoir power generation proposal.
Does that make sense?
I understand what the question is.
Okay.
The question is in reference to the investigation of the John Day pump storage project. Whether there is or isn't. I think that's the question that was intended. You want me to go first?
Sure.
There is an ongoing investigation as to the viability of a 1,500 megawatt pump storage project that would be located at the old aluminum smelter plant at the Goldendale site. At this point in time, it is not a project. The utility is investigating, along with Clickitat County, the potential for the project. At this time, it's simply diligence work. There was a letter went out to interested parties a couple days ago that asked for their comments. The page of stakeholders was over 3 pages long. And it's simply an attempt to identify if the project has any viability at all. It offers, as an upside, jobs creation and opportunities for people in Clickitat County. The PUD board, and I'm speaking as one commissioner, but the board's talked about it, and our perspective on it is simply that of a facilitator. The PUD is too small of an agency to take on that size of a project. But if we can be the facilitator and identify the potential positive upsides, which are huge, in the era of renewables that we have before us, to shape and balance and integrate all these resources into our system so that it all works for the future, and find a potential builder of that project, we will have benefited this county in many, many ways.
As far as what I know about their pump storage project, I've been attending the PD meeting since January, and all that's been reported has been by Randy. And basically, he said the project isn't dead. We're still doing some investigation. There really hasn't been any report. I went back and actually read some of the minutes to see if there was something factual on it. So Dan just said something new has gone out, so I imagine they'll have that at the next board meeting. As far as the whole idea of the pump storage, I don't know if you know that PUD has the water rights that they purchased from the aluminum plant. So they have over 14,000 acre feet of water. And out of that, 70% of it is non-potable. And so this is a tremendous water right that the PUD owns. And we all know in energy and electricity that if we can store it, that's like the holy grail of energy. And so if they can facilitate this, if our PUD can put this together, because Dan's right, we do not have the assets to do this. So we have to be just the facilitator. But it would be a tremendous opportunity for Clickitat County. It would bring jobs. And again, it's a way to use power during curtailment, to pump, and then you have storage. And that's basically what hydroelectric is. It's just one great big storage.
Thank you. Ms. Schroeder, are you planning to have an advisory committee on farm and ranch issues and classifications?
Absolutely. It's one of the things that I had discussed with Van when I was in the office and as the programs coordinator. At the time, there wasn't a huge amount of differences in costs for farming. The economy had been fairly stable, so he didn't choose to do one at the time, but I felt it's necessary, and I absolutely would have one.
The next question is for Ms. Hochter. What is the protocol for a public records request, and how long does that usually take?
And I'm not sure if that's addressed specifically to my office or the county as a whole. The state of Washington is recommending that counties have one public records officer. In small counties, it's rather difficult. Our budgets are tight, so having a full-time position that just handles public records is rather difficult. So in our county right now, each department handles their own and elected, has their own procedures and policies for public records requests. And then they take anywhere from 30 to 90 days normally, depending on the size of the public records request and how much work needs to be done for that search. Some public records requests are very, very voluminous. They're huge requests. Some are rather short, but because of the high liability involved in public records requests, they need to be checked and to ensure that all of the records are being given. In my office, we run anywhere from 30 to 60 days on records, depending on the size. That we have one employee in the office that handles the public records. They come in, if they come in to me or any other staff member, they're referred to that employee that sends that 5-day letter, clarifying the record or asking for any additional information. And then we start to process that record and produce documents as we have time and ability in the office.
Can I reply?
Yes.
I would like to say, because I'm sure that that's really directed at me.
Well, the question says to Ms. Hochter.
Oh, okay, can I just say what my policies are? I won't. You don't want to.
Well, it was to Ms. Hochter,
Okay.
so. Next one, we're trying to kind of rotate through the different positions. PUD, can you specify what % of revenue comes from what sources now? And since this is not addressed to a single candidate, we'll take both people. So Dan, I believe you started first last time, so Sherry, would you start first this time?
Well, I don't have all of the figures. Dan would have more of these. I know we have about a little over 20% of what I've read from the Fitch report and different reports is from our renewable resources. We have, we made another 5 million, and what is that percent, Dan? About 10 on transmission lines, and so those are our two sources of revenue. We also have, we're in a program with BPA called SLICE. So basically, these are where our incomes are. We're involved in Columbia Generation Station, which is Energy Northwest. So those are our main entities.
From a high-level perspective, roughly half of the revenues of the utility. Let me back up and give you what the current budget is. The current budget for this year, the Clickatat PUD, is $48 million. Roughly half of that revenue, and don't hold me to the numbers, is plus or minus. Half of the revenues are rate revenues from all the customers around the county. The balance of those revenues are generated by generation projects, transmission facilities, and other revenue streams that the utility has. And just to be clear about the income not increasing to make us able to make our payments, the budget of the utility when I took office was roughly $15 million at best. Today it's $48 million in budget. So the cash flow has risen with those capital expenditures. Our debt service coverage is 1.50 currently under our current budget, which means we have the revenues and the resources to cover our debt. Our utility is currently an A-rated utility, which has been upgraded in 2013 from a negative watch. So that gives you a high-level perspective on income and debt as well.
The next question is for both, for prosecuting attorney candidates. If I-594 passes, will you prosecute gun transfers, which are now legal? Why or why not? And how do you personally feel about I-594? Maybe you could explain what that is first.
Am I going first?
Sure. Who went first last time?
I think we're.
Okay, go ahead.
594, if I recall correctly, this problem is 591, 594, very controversial, Ken Dallas. Oh my God, anyway, I think 594 is that imposes background checks on individual gun transactions, which is a dramatic shift from the current state of the law. Yeah, I don't favor passage of either amendments or statutes, to be honest. Just because I don't favor 594, don't favor passing 594, does not mean that I will disregard my duty under the Constitution and the basic concepts of separation of powers to not do my job and to file and prosecute on referred cases from law enforcement where there's sufficient evidence to believe beyond a reasonable doubt that the individual is guilty of the crime. The prosecutor has discretion on a case-by-case basis to take many different factors into account how to resolve individual cases. It is not discretion to simply refuse to enforce a broad category of law. That's an abuse of discretion. That's the first symptom of the deterioration into, frankly, dictatorship in a one-party state. Our founding fathers set up a system of a separation of powers for a very good reason. The judiciary interprets the law, the legislature through the representatives or directly through the people pass the laws, and the executive enforces the law. However, it sounds like it's going to be a real non-issue. I think we both saw the sheriff's candidates on Tuesday night in Bickleton swear up and down that they're not going to ever arrest anyone or refer the cases over to the prosecutor anyways. But I believe it's the responsibility of the executive under just basic constitutional principles, separation of powers, that you can't simply refuse to enforce a law you don't like.
I disagree with that statement. I think as prosecuting attorneys, we are given prosecutorial immunity and discretion to prosecute the things and the values that our community holds for us. And I think it goes to understanding the job and being in it. If you look in the state of Washington, we are one of very few counties that actually prosecutes driving while suspended at all. And the reason why, it's not so much a matter of, I don't like that law, and in this case, I don't like the law because I think that there's some real issues with it, but you have limited resources. If we had unlimited resources and a budget that was huge, then your ability to prosecute cases, you would be able to look at things other than impact on community. How is this going to affect the people in it? And what are our resources? And for things that have no harm to the community, things that are not going to better our community, that are not putting people in danger, if there are transfers where there's drugs involved, criminals, if it's associated with something else, then by all means, then that needs to be enforced if it's going to make our community safer. But simply to take crimes where I'm in a field and I hand a gun to my husband to hold while he climbs over a fence, we have a crime, and you can prosecute that. We don't have the time and we don't have the resources. I have a small office, and I don't see any foreseeable future where the commissioners say, yep, you can have 15 more prosecutors, you can have 40 more cops to do these things. We have meth houses, we have serious problems in Klickitat County, and we need to focus those resources where they're best served and where they can assist the community.
Yeah, I'd like to read that. 594 specifically exempts family-to-family transactions, so that's a straw man. Think about this, folks, about what's being said here. That in the state of Washington, every other state you travel in the nation, that the law that applies to you and that the consequences for your actions will depend on which county you live in and who won the last election. I believe that's an unacceptable situation. We are a nation of laws, and we need to stick with that. This is constitutional foundation of our country. We need to follow the Constitution, the principles of the separation of powers, put in by our founding fathers and for a very good reason.
This is a
Can I
follow. Go ahead.
I'm just gonna say one thing, that does happen now. As you go from county to county, every county has different, they have different values, they have different problems that that community is facing. And again, there are only so many resources that you have. In King County, driving while suspended are not prosecuted at all, the clerks reduce them. And it's not because they think driving while suspended isn't important, it's very important. Speaking from a person that was at the Toppenish Casino and my car was hit by a person with no license and no insurance, and the cops came and said, we're not gonna prosecute. It's not because they don't care about that crime, but we only have so many resources. So when you're sitting at an academic table and you are discussing things theoretically, it would be a perfect world and you would have unlimited resources, but that is simply not the fact.
She got it, but she dismissed suspended license tickets for 3 years. This was the work of law enforcement that was just thrown out the window on a regular basis for over a 3-year period. You don't just take the work of law enforcement and say, we don't care what you do. We're okay with people that are breaking the law without valid insurance out on the streets in Gwinnett County. It's just, we're a nation of laws, they need to be enforced.
This is a follow-up question on that question. December 1st, 1955, Rosa Parks was arrested for failing to give her seat up to a white man. That was Alabama state law at that time. Would you prosecute that case?
Well, of course it would. And the statute went through the judiciary and was found to be invalid. So the judiciary performed their function at that time. Again, it's not the role of a king to decide what the law is and to apply it. It's the job of the executive to enforce the law. It's the role of the judges to interpret and to determine whether it's a valid law. This is basic concepts to the founding of our nation.
Again, no, I would not enforce that. The prosecutorial discretion and immunity is there for a reason, and we have beliefs and we have core values that we're elected to uphold. And a little bit on that driving while suspended program, I was approached by judges, we had deficits, and they said, Lori, we need to cut spending. How can we do it? How can we do it more efficiently? So in limited resources, limited budget, we came up with a plan to implement. You would dismiss your first driving while suspended. Then if you were able to get your license back, it would be refiled. Because of some staffing issues, because of limited resources, some of those were not refiled. DUIs were not allowed to be dismissed with that. That was not the policy, and the letter that went out on second and third driving while suspended was a much different case than what we see now.
But there was still dismissals of a suspended license when someone was arrested for a DUI cause. So, I mean, and the idea that this was the judge's idea is talk to Rick Hansen about high school. They're not going to go along with it.
The next question is for Dan. The PUD has 2 current lawsuits for negligence. How do you explain this negligence?
There is one claim in with the utility for negligence. That is the Highway 8 fire. That case is currently in Superior Court in Washington for the fact to find out whether or not the state of Washington and other agencies can actually sue or claim another public entity for firefighting costs. The circumstances surrounding this are highly unusual in that a green live tree, which was outside of our right-of-way, was severed in a high windstorm and thrown through our power lines. The DNR claims that the PUD was liable and should have known that green tree was going to break under a windy condition and go through the line. So bottom line on this one is if it comes out and we can actually be taken to court and sued over whether or not there was negligence, it is remaining to be seen. If we are held to be responsible for the green tree breaking and going through our line, then the legislature will have to enact new laws to detail what a danger tree is. Under the current law, a green tree is not a danger tree. The PUD does have a responsibility if it's a dead tree that is obviously leaning towards our power line. We have the authority and the obligation to remove those, and we do. The other fire that you're evidently referring to, there is only a claim that's been filed from the DNR for those firefighting costs. It is not a lawsuit at the moment. The PUD is engaged in conducting its own investigation. We've interviewed several on-site witnesses that have an entirely different story to tell than what the manufactured evidence that the DNR has presented us with. So at the end of the day, we are very, very confident that facts will come out on that mile marker 28 fire, and that the DNR will either redo their investigation or they will drop their charges, because we believe on what we have now, there is no negligence on the part of the utility. And we are going to move forward and create our own investigation and put together a team with other utilities to deal with these new challenges from the DNR for firefighting costs.
Next question. This is for the assessor, and it specifically asks for Krista first. What is the difference between manifest error and appraiser opinion?
A manifest error is generally something that is just an error through the computer program. An appraiser opinion is when, you know, they just feel that something needs to be different than what it is. So, are you talking about changing values based on that, or? Yeah, a manifest error is basically a computer-generated error, really. I mean, it's an error that, you know, either through not knowing enough information and not having it in the computer system is done. You know, appraisers is, their opinion is, I mean, it would be their opinion. So they're, yeah, I'm not quite sure exactly what they wanted from that question.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I'll answer.
Okay.
That question is more an appraiser opinion. You need to have an appraisal background to be able to understand that. Appraiser opinion has to do with valuing, when we go out and inspect properties, we're going to look at the quality and condition of a property. The condition is going to be how complicated it is to build. The condition is going to be what kind of shape it's in. So you may have excellent condition, poor condition. It may be very complicated to build. It may be very simple to build. We have, when appeals come in, the appellant has the opportunity, the person that's appealing, has the opportunity, if they appeal within the 30 days of that window, we can change appraiser opinion. So we can go out and re-inspect, and if we see that it really is run down, instead of being in very good shape, we can make that opinion, we can make that change. After that 30-day window to appeal has gone by, we can't make appraiser opinion changes. The only thing that we can change is manifest error. Manifest error has to do if we've actually made a mistake. We might have measured the square footage of your house incorrectly. We might have said you have 4 bathrooms and you only have 2. That is manifest error. We can correct manifest error at any time, but appraiser opinion can only be changed if you do it within that 30-day window of your appeal.